Madam President, on Sunday, June 20th, Joe Biden will have been president for exactly 5 months. And in these 5 months, we've seen crisis after crisis after crisis. We've experienced a gas crisis where we had gas lines and skyrocketing energy prices. We're on the verge of an inflation crisis where everywhere we look, prices are rising on food, on housing, on lumber. We've already had a war in the Middle East. And we've got a border crisis that has been raging so intensely that we're on pace to see 2 million illegal immigrants come through our unsecured border this year. Just last month, 180,034 illegal immigrants crossed the border. To put that in perspective, that number is a 674% increase over the number of illegal immigrants that crossed the border last May. A 674% increase. And that number is a 21-year high. The reason for this is simple. The crisis that has unfolded is the direct result of political decisions made by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Number one, the first week in office, President Biden immediately halted construction of the border wall. Number two, that same week, President Biden reinstated the failed catch and release policy. And number three, most inexplicably, the Biden administration ended the Remain in Mexico international agreement, an historic agreement negotiated by President Trump with the government of Mexico, whereby the government of Mexico agreed that those who crossed illegally into Mexico would remain in Mexico while their asylum proceedings were pending in the United States. That agreement was a tremendous success. It produced last year the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Let me repeat that. Just 6 months ago, our country had achieved the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris come into office. They rip to pieces the international agreement that produced that success. And today we have the highest rate of illegal immigration in 20 years. Meanwhile, as the crisis rages, Joe Biden is nowhere to be found, and Kamala Harris is nowhere to be found. In 5 months in office, Joe Biden couldn't be bothered to go down to the border and see the humanitarian disaster his policies have created. Kamala Harris, who was designated as, quote, in charge of the border, seems determined to go anywhere she can but the border. In the 84 days since she's been tasked with handling the border crisis, do you know how many press conferences she's given? Not even one. Not a single press conference in 84 days. She can't be honest about what's causing the crisis, so she hides from questions. The one time she saw questions was with NBC's Lester Holt, where he asked her about going to the border. She responded with that now characteristic and, quite honestly, creepy laugh, where she said, "We've been to the border." I'm not sure who the royal we was, but that we doesn't include Joe Biden, who hasn't been to the border as president. That we doesn't include Kamala Harris, who hadn't been to the border as vice president. And Lester Holt, to NBC's credit, Lester Holt actually asked a follow-up question, and it was a very simple question. You haven't been to the border. To which she responded oddly, "Well, I haven't been to Europe either." Mr. President, we're not facing a humanitarian crisis, a border crisis, a public health crisis, a national security crisis in Europe. We're facing it on our southern border. We're facing it in my home state of Texas. And the vice president, it seems, cannot be bothered to go and see firsthand the failures that President Biden's policies are causing. I also want to touch on one issue that greatly affects border communities, and that is our land ports of entry. While Joe Biden has repeatedly encouraged this crisis of illegal immigration, he is at the same time preventing lawful border crossing. Border communities are suffering immensely right now because important land ports of entry in El Paso and Del Rio, in Eagle Pass and Laredo, in Rio Grande City, in McAllen, in Pharr, and Brownsville remain closed to everyone except those deemed essential traffic. Basically, Mexicans who have a visa to enter the United States legally cannot do so through these land ports of entry unless they are going to school, working, or somehow considered essential. Non-essential travel from the United States into the United States from Mexico for shopping, for visiting family and friends, for casual visits are not allowed by the Biden administration. Instead, the Biden administration has decided to keep our land ports of entries closed for non-essential travel until at least June 21st, ostensibly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This decision makes no sense. When Americans have access now to effective vaccines, and the Biden administration is just fine with allowing hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens to stream across the border and be released in our communities, despite testing positive at a COVID positivity rate of 10%, the Biden administration has no problem with that, and they perpetuate the policies that continue that disaster. And yet at the same time, they shut down trade and legal tourism through our land ports of entry. For a long time, I've summed up my immigration views very simply in 4 words: legal, good; illegal, bad. I think the overwhelming majority of Americans agree with that proposition. And yet, as we look at the first 5 months of the Biden-Harris administration, it seems for President Biden and Vice President Harris, their immigration policy is legal, bad; illegal, good. That makes no sense. It's exactly backwards. We should open up our land ports of entry to legal tourism, which would greatly benefit the border communities, especially in my home state of Texas. And we need to end this heartless, inhumane policy that is resulting in tens of thousands of children being trafficked in by human traffickers, which is resulting in thousands of children being physically abused and sexually abused, being thrown into the Biden cages, packed in larger and larger numbers. Ignoring this problem won't go away. Behaving like an ostrich, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris cannot plunge their head into the sand and hope the disaster at the border will magically disappear. They don't want to go to the border because they know that TV cameras will follow them in the border, and their only hope is people don't notice the lives that are being destroyed, the crime that is coming in, the vandalism that is coming in, the public health threat that we're seeing. This is not compassionate. It's not humane. This chaos is wrong. And it's time to end. I yield the floor.